So, who am I talking to?
Jim Bob Howard.
Jim Bob, where are you? Where are you?
I am in just outside of DC.
Hey, you were in Texas for a long time when we first started, right?
For a long time. With a name like Jim Bob, it kind of goes with the territory.
But did you play football?
No, no.
I want to talk a little bit about how you entered the SharePoint community. Can you give us, the 30,000-foot overview? How'd you get started?
Sure. I started working with SharePoint in 2009. Early in that year, I started with a company that needed a webmaster, web developer, and I had come from 4 years of doing ministry and not doing a whole lot in that space, but that was what my background had been before I had gone off to do ministry stuff for about 4 years. And SharePoint was completely new to me at that time, and so I brought all of the web knowledge that I had into that job and learned SharePoint on the fly. They didn't have any training budget for me for the first year because I started in March or so, and so they said, "Hey, for this year we don't have any training for you." I'm like, "All right." So obviously I had to turn to the internet, which is a great place for training. And one of the first things I found was end user SharePoint. And I dug through the articles, read everything that I possibly could just to be able to get my job done. And I think it was within the first month or so, I commented on one of the posts about the color coded calendar, and how I had implemented that and done something a little bit differently. And then I got an email from you asking if I would do a screencast about it. So I did a screencast. We posted that, got tons of hits on it, and so I just started posting everything that I was learning, taking all of my web knowledge and applying that to SharePoint. And as I was working through it, realizing a lot of people didn't quite get all of those things, and so I just shared what I knew.
Nice. What people are interested in the growth curve. How long did it take till you got credibility and visibility, I guess I should say, in the community?
About a month.
It only took a month.
Well, I started working with SharePoint in March of 2009, and I posted that screencast in April. And
your credibility was immediate?
Well, I mean, it took some growth, but it was pretty quick. So I was getting. It wasn't very long before I was answering questions on the forum.
Right.
I was writing posts and articles of things that I was doing very early. I didn't realize the credibility that I had until the following October of 2010, when I went to SP TechCon, and I met you for the first time in person then, met a whole bunch of people that I had been, writing alongside of on end-user SharePoint. And it was the first training I was able to go to, because remember I said that we didn't have any training budget. And so when I was looking around trying to find, what kind of training do I need, there was a lot of admin training, there was a lot of developer training, there was a lot of IT pro training, there was very little end-user training. And some of the people that I respected a lot from end user SharePoint were speaking at SP TechCon. So I said, hey, this is the training that I need to go to. Look at these classes that they're having. And, it's not super in-depth in a lot of places, but there's a whole bunch of access. And so I talked to my manager. He said, sure, we'll send you to that. So I show up at SP TechCon to go just absorb as much as I can. And everybody said, so when are you speaking? I was like, what? Speaking? What are you talking about? This is the first actual SharePoint training I've ever been to. They said, yeah, we've seen what you've written, though. You should be speaking here. So I said, all right. I wonder if I could speak at the next SP TechCon. So my first SP TechCon was in October of 2010. 2011, in June of that year, I spoke at SP TechCon. Before that, though, I submitted to a couple of SharePoint Saturdays. I spoke at India. I spoke at EMEA with you. I submitted and spoke in Houston, New Orleans. Again,
so it was pretty quick then. I mean, once you get in the circuit, it starts to happen, right? Well, we spoke in Nairobi together, right?
Well, yeah, and so we spoke in Nairobi. Well, it's funny too, because when we were talking about influence, and the building of that influence. There were a couple of really key things that you have said to me over the course of my SharePoint career. The first one is, hey, can you do a screencast of that color-coded calendar? The second one was at SB TechCon when you said, when are you speaking? Mm-hmm. And then a third one was when you said, yeah, sure, we'll go to Africa.
So you've got two big things that I'm very high on. One is giving your knowledge away through screencasts. That builds immediate credibility, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And then the byproduct of that is the credibility gets you the speaker engagements, and then it just starts to cycle. True.
Absolutely. And I took it another step from there. When I first started speaking in SharePoint, I realized that I really enjoyed it a lot, and I wanted to, and especially with SharePoint Saturdays, whenever you're speaking, you're typically doing that completely out of pocket. I mean, some people get paid, get it reimbursed to go, but I wasn't in a situation where my company was trying to sell SharePoint services. And so if I was going to go speak, it was because I really felt passionate about it and I was going to go do it. And so it was all completely out of my own pocket. So, naturally, I wanted to speak locally, if possible, and try to save a little bit of that. And there was not a SharePoint Saturday in Austin, and so I talked to another guy in the community and said, "Hey, why don't we do a SharePoint Saturday Austin?" And Dallas has had two, and Houston's had two, and San Antonio's had two, and Austin is the tech capital to Texas. Why don't we have one? So we organized one. We put one on in 2012, and it went fabulously. You weren't able to make it because you were in South America and Antarctica, but I know. Well, and that was part of the reason why I hit you up for Africa too. So it really was. The interesting thing is that when I first posted something on SharePoint, on end user SharePoint, I didn't know where that was going to go. I was just trying to share my knowledge. And then I was asked, why aren't you speaking? So I'm like, all right, so I'll speak. And so I spoke, and I was like, well, I can organize one of these things, or at least get the people together to organize it. And so I did, and it went great. We had a fantastic SharePoint Saturday Austin. And after doing all that planning, I thought, I need to rest for a bit, because that was a lot of work putting on a SharePoint Saturday. So I rested for about, 2 weeks, I guess, and a friend of my family, or a couple who lives in Nairobi, had contacted my wife. They were talking on Facebook, and of course in February there it's summer because they're south of the equator. And so she said, well, you guys should come, because she was talking about how great the Nairobi summer was. And I said, oh, well, hey, if we're going to go, let's go during SharePoint Saturday Nairobi, so that I can speak while I'm there. Because I like doing that. So
as if there was such a thing.
Well, I just assumed, it's a big place. And so I went to the SharePoint Saturday website and I looked, and sure enough, there wasn't one. And so I thought, well, let me just find the SharePoint user group. And I just got through putting on Austin. Maybe I can help them, put on Nairobi. Well, there wasn't a user group. So I went to LinkedIn and I said, hey, SharePoint Nairobi, who can I find? And I found, 50 or so people, and everybody that I talked to said, no, there's no user group here because I'm the only person doing SharePoint.
Right.
I found 50 other people who were doing SharePoint. Tell you what, I'm going to fly over there. I'm going to introduce y'all to each other, and y'all can start a group. So then I contacted you, and I contacted Joel, and I contacted Michael, and I said, hey, anybody want to go to Africa? I got an idea for you. Why don't you guys take a tour, and I just need you to be in Nairobi on a Saturday. That's all. Show up on a Saturday. And I contacted the guys down in South Africa and said, hey, you guys want to come up to Kenya? And they said, yeah, we'll come up to Kenya. So next thing I knew, we had a date, a big long tour of what you guys are going all over Africa. I actually got to go to Cape Town and speak at SharePoint Saturday there. Flew up to Nairobi and organized, got everything going there. We had 100 people show up.
That was an astounding event.
Yeah. It was amazing. And I loved, the topic that you talked about building community. We did the keynote in the middle of the day. Typically do it at the beginning. I thought, I want to make sure that everybody's there, do a captured audience while they're eating, and we'll do it at that time. So you're talking about building community. Well, these guys caught fire with that. I tried to talk them into getting a user group going before we got there. And they kind of liked the idea, but they didn't quite jump onto it and get it figured out what they really, really what I was talking about. Until we show up and we've got 100 people that are there when they thought they were the only person. You talk with them about, hey, building community. We're sitting at the SharePoint afterwards, sharing a couple of beers, a couple of Tuskers, their local beer, and these guys are like head down and they're talking and like, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to get together, we're going to do that. A month later, they had their first bug meeting. And they met every month, and then they did another SharePoint Saturday completely on their own the following year.
Awesome. Awesome. I think one of the things that people don't realize that anybody can be an organizer of an event. And we're not talking about SharePoint in general, any industry. If
Absolutely.
you have a group of people that have the same interest, you can easily put something together to get people together, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and we did that. I mean, and Nairobi was a great example of that. I'd never been to Nairobi. I didn't know anybody in Nairobi except for my friends, and they weren't involved in SharePoint whatsoever. So I hit up LinkedIn and just tried to find people that knew it. And then talked to friends that, hey, would you be interested in going there and speaking? And they said, yeah, sure, we'll go do that. I actually found a guy who was from Nairobi who lives in the U.S., and he flew over and spoke for us. And he said it was fabulous. And everybody just said, hey, thanks for coming. But I organized that entire thing on Skype, across the internet, from Texas to a place 8 hours difference. And we needed a venue. We needed people to show up. We needed people to speak. And so that's what we did.
Great. To tie it all together, if people want to be involved in an industry community, not just SharePoint, but any industry, and they want to become involved, what are the 3 things you would recommend that they do?
Write, speak, and go.
That's good. That's short and sweet, right?
Well, and that's it. I mean, writing. I mean, your industry has knowledge that needs to be shared. It has information that needs to be gotten out to new people and old people and people who are moving around in different spaces, and so that needs to be shared. And you've got information. You've posted a number of things from Derek Sivers, and I love everything that he does. He's got one little video. It's called "Obvious to You, Amazing to Others," and every time I feel like I really don't have anything I have to share, I go back and I watch that video again. Because some of the things that are obvious to me, I type them up and people go, wow, that was amazing. I'm like, that was so obvious, but it wasn't to them. And so when I post those things, people say, this is fantastic. I'm like, well, I'm going to keep posting that stuff. So writing is really important. Get into your industry's writing stream. If there's a trade magazine, if there's a website, if there's a YouTube channel, whatever, doing the screencast is a great way to do that. If you don't feel comfortable in front of the camera, although it's really easy to do a screencast because you don't have to be in front of the camera if it's something technology wise, or even create a PowerPoint presentation and video that. So writing is really important, and then once you've been writing, you get recognized as someone who knows what they're talking about. Put together a presentation and go and speak. Meet the people that you're writing to, because you will get, first of all, you'll get a lot of people say, wow, that was amazing. I couldn't do what you do. I'm like, yeah, you can. And one of the things that I've done too, just building on top of writing and speaking and going, I was talking to a woman at the first SP TechCon that I went to, and she had been working with SharePoint for almost 10 years at the time. And she had found the SharePoint community and end-user SharePoint and SharePoint Saturdays about 2 months before I met her. And she's showing up at SP TechCon. She's like, oh my gosh, it's so fantastic. Look at all this stuff that I'm doing. I didn't even know there was this community. And I said, wait a minute. You've been working with SharePoint for that amount of time? You've got some stories that somebody needs to hear. I want you to be speaking. So when we planned SharePoint Saturday Austin, I called her and I said, you're going to be speaking here. I don't know what you're talking about, but you're going to come and you're going to present something. And we're doing a Women in SharePoint panel, and I want you to sit in there and talk on that. She's spoken at more SharePoint Saturdays than I have.